Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Transfercast right here on lastwordonfootball.com. This is the show where we're only serious about Arsenal transfer rumors. I am your host, Martin Hawkins, and you can find me on Twitter at LWOSMartin. I'm joined by my two favorite writers from Last Word on Football, at least that's what I told them to get them on the pod. First, one of our newest but most exciting writers, Mr. Chance Haire with an E, who you can find on Twitter at Chance Haire LWOS. Hello, Chance.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Really good to have you. Also joining us is a writer who also does a podcast of his own, the Footy Ado podcast, Mr. Zach Rayment, who you can find on Twitter at Zach Rayment. Hello, Zach.
Hey, man. How we doing today?
Oh, real good, real good. It's really nice to have the both of you here, but even more important than the two of you, it's really nice to have you, listener, on the show. So let's jump straight into it. Part 1 is where we dissect and discuss the juiciest transfer rumors surrounding Arsenal Football Club. And of course, right now, with there's not much play going on, and obviously with our contract situation, there is one name that just seems to keep popping up and popping up. That is of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. And our first rumor comes to us from the Star. It involves Alba as well as Real Madrid. Apparently, the Galacticos are considering offering Arsenal Dani Ceballos on a permanent transfer plus cash money to the Gunners for Alba in the next window. So I guess, Chance, let's go ahead and start with you, bud. Since it's the Star and not the Sun, should we believe this rumor, or are we maybe still taking it with a grain of salt?
I think we could definitely believe the Star more than the Sun, but it isn't one of your big-hitting reporters in terms of news sites and all that. But I think this is one of those cases, Martin and Zach, where you could just have someone just plug in a name or two, plug in a club or two, and just get that same kind of player plus cash deal for big star player that we see all over for however long the internet's been alive, essentially. But this can be a realistic prospect. I think this is something that could happen. Do I think it's concrete? No. But do I think it could become concrete in the future? I think it has to do with the Aubameyang's contract situation, like you kind of alluded to at the start. But I don't think that we should be all too worried about it just yet.
Yeah, I definitely agree, especially with that first part where this sort of this feels like transfer rumor by number. You know, you remember those the watercolor paintings you did when you were a kid, where it'd say, hey, color number 1 is blue, so wherever it has a 1, you color that in blue. You know, we all know that Alba could be on the way out. We know that Real Madrid, they always want attackers. Dani Ceballos on loan at Arsenal just seems like, 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, and that's how this rumor came about. So, Zach, I'm just curious about what are your gut feelings about this rumor?
It's believable. All of it sounds feasible. We talked last week about Ceballos. Should he stay? And he's kind of had an up and down season, out with injuries and everything. And of course, we know the rumors swirling around Aubameyang, and I guess out of the clubs that he's rumored to be, clubs that are rumored to be interested in him, this one makes a lot of sense. He's talked about moving to Real Madrid in the past. When he was with Borussia Dortmund, there was rumors linking him to Madrid that never materialized, but the player himself said that, he promised to his grandfather that he would play for Real Madrid. So if this is a possibility, I can see him pushing for it. But I'd also like to know, how likely is it to do a player swap? Because you don't really see it that often, and I know that we swapped Alexis Sanchez for Henrik Mkhitaryan in a straight swap, which was, that's kind of like a one-off. You just really don't see it happen all that often. But if Real Madrid are serious about this, what kind of cash are they including for Aubameyang? Because he, regardless of his contract, he is the superior player in this deal, and Arsenal should want a good amount added on to that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I guess that sort of leads us into another of the questions I wanted to ask is would Ceballos plus cash be tempting enough for Arsenal to sell? I mean, obviously we've got, 65, 70 million pounds wrapped up in Alba. On Real Madrid, they have previously stated that they wanted something in the region of 50 million for Ceballos. So, the way I'm reading it is that they think they're getting Alba for 20 mil plus some guy who spent, a season on loan here, and he was kind of in the team, out of the team a little bit. So, Chance, let's go back to you. Would Ceballos plus, let's just say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million, would that be tempting enough for us to sell?
I think when it comes to the cash, and considering our lack of funds from exiting the Europa League and our potential mid-table finish in the Premier League, we wouldn't have that much money to spend in the transfer window if we were to want to go for players. I think that any money at this point could be tempting to the board, but I think the board would be smart enough to push for more than something like 20 million plus the BIOS, especially considering we would be selling the person who's basically made sure that we survive in the Premier League. If we didn't have him, we probably wouldn't be. So I think that they recognize the importance of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. I think a more realistic, at least more logical in terms of what Arsenal would be wanting, would maybe be, I'd say, if it was cash plus Ceballos, I would say maybe Ceballos plus 35 million, because that is a good bit higher transfer sum that we could disperse to other areas of the team, which I think is what they might want to do, and I think that's what Mikel Arteta would want to do.
Yeah, and then like you say, that extra even £10 million, that would really go a long way, because we have so many areas of need. If we lose Alba, then we'll need another striker on top of needing wide players, on top of needing at least one midfielder, on top of needing help in the defense. So Zach, I'd just like to sort of get your 2 cents on this. Would about 30 million, 35 million plus Ceballos do it, or would Arsenal maybe just want straight cash?
Quite frankly, given the fact that his contract runs out at the end of the season, I would sell for Ceballos plus 20. That's if the club are interested in bringing Ceballos on a permanent deal. They might have their eyes set on a different midfielder and say, no, we're not going to we don't want Ceballos, but let's talk about a move anyway. I think that any amount to get for this guy in his 30s is tempting. Yeah, I think the board are going to be very tempted with selling Aubameyang this summer, and I do think it ends up happening, because you have to look back at our history, and we saw what happened with it was very unique that it happened at the same exact time with Mesut Ozil and Alexis Sanchez, both in the similar situation, which it was ridiculous that the club allowed that to happen in the first place, having their two best players' contract run out at the end of the same season. But they got it right. What they thought they did by getting it right was signing Ozil and parting with Alexis. They should have sold Alexis 6 months earlier. We don't want to see a situation where we get to next January and we sell Aubameyang for
the next Mkhitaryan, whoever that may be,
for a bag of we'll get like a bag of balls, maybe some training cones. But then you look at the Ozil situation, and they signed him to a lucrative contract, and that also hasn't worked out. So they somehow, although they went two different directions with those players, they got them both wrong. So the board has a lot of pressure on them to get this one right, and they have to be sure in what they're doing. So, but I do think that Ceballos plus 20-30 million would be a deal that not only should be tempting, but they should absolutely take.
Sure. So I guess if I can just ask directly, so you're saying that we won't see another Alexis/Ozil situation play out with Alba. We're not going to see him still at the club with 6 months left to go on his contract.
I don't think so. I think it would be foolish to do it now. Fingers crossed. I hope the man signs a new deal, but I don't see that. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, and then Chance, I just like your 2 cents on it. Will Alba sign a new deal, and if he doesn't, will he still be at the club next January?
I think it's definitely a good possibility that he will sign a new contract, but in an off chance that he doesn't, I don't think that we'll see him at this time next year. I think we will sell him at that point.
Gotcha. And just circling back to the rumor that we're referencing, that article from the Star, they also, and this I guess speaks to a little bit of the transfer rumor by number thing that we were talking about before. The Star also mentioned that the Galacticos are looking as well at Erling Haaland as well as Harry Kane. So I'd just like, let's go back to you, Zach. If you're Florentino Perez, you've got your endless amounts of money, and you've got all these top strikers who would probably sign for you. You've got Haaland, you've got Kane, you've got Aubameyang. Which one of the three tempts you the most?
From a competitive standpoint, I hope he says Kane and takes Spurs' best player away. But
I like it.
I think the person that offers the most out of that has to be Erling Haaland. He's so young. He's just an absolute dominant player in front of goal. It seems like it's not that he's not one that scores when he wants. It's that he actually can't stop scoring. The start that he had with Dortmund, the amount of Champions League goals he got, even when he was with Red Bull, with Salzburg. He's a phenomenal player, and I think that he's probably the most sought after striker in the world right now, in terms of, we can probably still get him for, I'm not saying he's the best striker in the world, but say you wanted to sign Kylian Mbappe, you're dropping like 200 million. Yeah. You're not at that point with Erling Haaland, but it could get to that point. So I think Madrid should probably go in for him before that happens.
Gotcha. Yeah, and just when you mentioned Erling Haaland in the Champions League, it just reminded me of something I saw, I think, on Reddit a few months back, where it was right after one of those games where he scored like 3 or 4 goals or however many goals for Salzburg, and he recorded a video of himself while driving his fancy sports car. And you know what song he had playing in the radio? The Champions League anthem, and he was like singing along to it and everything. It was just something about it made me absolutely lose my mind laughing. But anyway, on a completely unrelated note, Chance, I just like your thoughts. If Real Madrid are in for all 3 strikers, which of the 3 do they sign?
Looking at the 3, I think the one that they're going to push for the most is going to be Erling Haaland. Just like Zach said, he's one of those players who just cannot stop scoring, and I think that's the type of player that Madrid would be looking for, considering they brought in another young Bundesliga superstar striker last summer in Luka Jovic, and he hasn't worked out. He's probably going to get sold or loaned out by the end of this season in the next transfer window, so they're definitely going to be looking for someone to challenge Benzema or even partner him. I think Haaland is the most realistic choice, because he's one of those players who, it's like Kylian Mbappe, how he's been linked with basically every big club on earth at this point, and he'll end up moving to one of those big clubs eventually. Even after just 6 months in Dortmund, I could see him being maybe a bit of a journeyman, kind of moving after short stints at clubs. Maybe he's using Borussia Dortmund as a stepping stone towards that, and I think Madrid could bounce or hop on that. I think Harry Kane, I would have loved to see Harry Kane leave the Premier League, let me tell you. But I think, knowing how, I believe Kane is currently injured, and this isn't his first injury in this season alone. He suffered from last year to now. He suffered about 4 or 5 injuries that have lasted him a good little while. So his injury record definitely isn't something that Madrid would want to have on their books. Is he talented? Undoubtedly. He's one of the best strikers in the world, in my opinion. But looking at Haaland, does he even have an injury record at his age? I don't think so.
It's a good question.
And I don't think, considering Harry Kane, even ever since he was around 19, 20, 21, he has had at least slight injury problems, and I think they're only to develop as he gets older. I think Madrid might be turned off by that. And I think Haaland is the best option. Aubameyang, we've already gone over him enough. I think that it is definitely between those two. Sadly, we just have to keep Kane in the Premier League. But I think their top choice right now is Erling Haaland.
Yeah. Although if Harry Kane does stay at Spurs and Jose Mourinho does stay at Spurs, hopefully we'll have another Luke Shaw scenario, and Kane will just be an absolute husk of himself. I guess that's sort of the best case scenario we can hope for right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we pretty much wrapped up on that rumor. It was it sounds like a color by numbers rumor, although maybe just a bit of truth to it, because it would make at least some sense for Real Madrid. But let's stay on the topic of strikers, and let's talk about a potential replacement just in case Aubameyang does leave in the next transfer window. And this rumor comes to us from Goal, so probably slightly more reputable than either the Sun or the Star. But the Goal tells us that Napoli are ready to sell Polish international striker Arkadiusz Milik, as his contract is expiring in the same summer as Alba, and he has informed the club that he's not really interested in signing a new club. Re-signing a new contract, and wants to leave the club, rather. So, I forget who we started with, but I guess, Chance, we'll start with you on this one. Should we believe Goal when they say that Milik is leaving Napoli and that Arsenal are amongst the clubs who would be interested in his signature? Chance?
Oh, sorry, I just got disconnected.
Sorry about that.
So, what are we at right now? Arkadiusz Milik?
Yeah, we're on Milik. Basically just, should we believe Goal when they say that Milik is going to leave Napoli, he doesn't want to stay there, and that Arsenal may be interested to sort of bring him in to sort of try to fill that void that Alba leaving would absolutely create?
I think, in my opinion, this is a weird one. I think Arkadiusz Milik is one of those players. It's another one of those, we could just fill any striker's name in here, and that is something we've seen in the past. Do I think it's believable? I think so. He is a talented striker. He has impressed in the Serie A, and I think he might look for another chance in the Premier League, especially after the rumors of him saying he wants to leave Napoli. I think we definitely could see him come to the Premier League. Do I think it's Arsenal? It's really one of those where I just don't know. It'd have to be more of a concrete rumor for me to make a decision. But, I mean, I wouldn't mind having him with the club if all believes.
Gotcha. So Zach, what it sort of sounds like is, sort of like with the last rumor where, we know that Alba might just leave the club, and Real Madrid are always, buying top strikers. It looks like if we lose our top striker, we're going to have to look elsewhere. Arkadiusz Milik is, on the last year of his contract, so it looks like a deal could happen. Does this sound believable to you, or is this just another case of somebody pretending to be an ITK?
So, I mean, you take there's only a couple sources out there that you believe every single time, but this one seems feasible, because. One, the contract situation. Two, he's 26 years old. That's he should be coming into his best years right now, and that would suit Arsenal. I struggle on this one just because I would need to hear a bit more about Lacazette leaving. I don't think that they would bring in Milik. I don't think that they're going to bring in someone who doesn't double as a winger, if we're not going to get rid of Aubameyang and Lacazette, because with the limited transfer funds, I think that Eddie Nketiah probably has a place in the squad next season, and at that point, if you brought in Milik, you kept Lacazette after selling Aubameyang, you go with Milik, Lacazette, and Nketiah. I mean, even Martinelli can play as a center forward. So it would seem a bit congested in an area that, yes, we would have to replace Aubameyang, but it's still not the biggest area we need to improve it. Now, if the club sees this as a good use of transfer funds, they can get a deal done because he only has 12 months left on the contract, I'm all for it. The one thing that I would love about this deal is the fact that when he was 16, he spent some time on trial at Tottenham. And if we could sign him and bring him in and he could just bang in goal after goal, that would feel nice. That would be a nice little twist to it.
A little reverse Harry Kane there.
Yeah. I'm all for it only because of that detail.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. That would be just absolutely ironic. Yeah, and I really like what you said about the whole squad building aspect of it. So if we lose Alba, we're losing not just a top striker, we're losing our starting left winger. So we would sort of almost be creating two holes, but at the same time we've already got Nketiah and Lacazette, and as you say, Martinelli could play there. I think I saw a quote from Arteta where he said that he actually sees Martinelli's long-term position as being striker, so Milik would sort of get in the way of his development. So. And especially because, that just sort of makes me a little bit hesitant about this rumor, especially because if you read the article, Goal was saying that Napoli are asking for 50 million euros. Is Arkadiusz Milik worth that much? Chance, is he worth 50 million?
I don't think so. I think that's just one of those big numbers that clubs throw out there to try and ward off other clubs from trying to sign him. I think. Yes, he may be just coming into his prime, and he has impressed at Napoli, scoring 36 goals and 83 appearances. But, one, I don't think that's enough. And two, I think we would probably want to go for him if he was worth maybe 30, 35 million. I think 50 is too much for someone who his only bit of Premier League experience was when he was 16 and on trial. I think it'd be a bit risky, in my opinion, to shell out that much for an unproven player in this league.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, and I'm just taking a look back at his statistics. Yeah, at Napoli in Serie A, he's got 36 goals through 83 matches, 46 and 109 across all competitions. For Poland, he has 49 caps, 14 goals. In the Eredivisie, 32 goals through 52 appearances. So, a decent strike record pretty much everywhere he's been, but everywhere he's been has been, no offense to these other leagues, it's just not quite of the same caliber as the Premier League. So, yeah. Zach, I'll ask you about the 50 million fee. Does that seem like just a sort of fee to scare other clubs away so that they can sign Milik to a new deal, or what was the deal with that figure?
Yeah. I'd say so. If the player pushes to get out, there's no way that Napoli is going to sell for 50 million. 30 is more realistic, especially, I hate to bring up what's going on with the coronavirus and everything, but clubs aren't making money right now. I think that the transfer window that we do see is going to look a bit different than transfer windows in the past, because over the past few seasons we've just seen the transfer fees skyrocket. Like Manchester United spent 80 something million on Harry Maguire.
Yeah, 85.
I think we have to see what's gonna happen as far as how much clubs have to spend, because we have an idea. Well, Arsenal don't have a lot to spend. Okay, well that number is going to be lower if the season doesn't continue. But I do like the idea of bringing in Milik, but it's just like I said, it's what are we moving on from in addition to Aubameyang, because Aubameyang right now, if he leaves, he creates a hole at left wing. He doesn't create a hole at striker, because we have Lacazette. But in my opinion, I think you have to move on from Lacazette as well. At that point, you're just like, okay, this little era that we had here, it didn't work out, and we've got to start again, because Lacazette's form has been terrible. So I do like the idea of getting Milik in, but for 50 million, that's gonna be a no for me.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. I mean, we saw earlier this season with Barry being kicked out of the football league. You know, the one of the world's or one of England's oldest clubs, Notts County as well, had a lot of financial difficulties. Bolton, I mean, even when there's football to play, even when there is match day revenue and commercial income coming into these clubs, the smaller ones are beginning to struggle. And so, if this goes on for, say, another 6 months, would a club like Arsenal start to struggle a bit financially? And, in a world where nobody has even, 10 million euros to spend on a player, you can't very well ask 50 mil, let alone 50 mil for Milik. So, all right, I guess we covered that rumor pretty decently well. Unless, does anyone have any last word about Arkadiusz Milik?
I'm good on that one, man.
Okay, real good. So let's move on to our third and final transfer rumor for part one. This one comes to us from a much more reliable source than The Sun. This comes from Sky Sports. They report that Mikel Arteta is keen on bringing in Carlos Soler of Valencia. He's a midfielder, 23 years old. He did just sign a new contract in December that's going to keep him at the club for another 2.5 seasons. However, what may just make him available to buy from Valencia is the fact that the club are beginning to struggle somewhat financially, like we were just talking about. Sky reports they will need to raise a reported £36 million by June the 30th, by the traditional end of the footballing calendar this year. So despite the fact that Soler, he's on a lengthy contract, he's very promising, he's been contributing a lot for the club, he could be on his way out the door. So I guess, Zach, let's come to you. Do you buy this rumor? Do you think that Valencia could be willing to sell Carlos Soler?
I think that they're willing to sell. My question is, are Arsenal willing to go in for this guy? He plays. He sometimes plays on the right, sometimes plays centrally. Kind of splits time between playing on the wing and playing centrally. So that in itself is a worry because of how much we spent on Pepe. Now, if Mikel Arteta sees him as a central midfield option, then it becomes more believable to me. And if they're desperate for funds and we can get him a 23-year-old midfielder who just signed a new contract on the cheap, I think that it would be a great buy. It's just how high does that transfer fee go? Because you really have to balance the need versus how good the player is, and I don't think Arsenal have done well in that area over the past, like spending 70 million on Pepe, who he played well in France. Obviously, he hasn't been great this season, but everyone was excited about that. But thought, well, we have spots in this squad where we need to improve a little bit more. That's where I get a little bit worried here. It's a good player, but do we need him based on the position he's playing in?
Yeah. Would he be would he represent good value for money? I mean, there was nothing concrete in that rumor to say exactly how much Valencia will hold out for. But considering their financial situation, it would have to be probably at least 40 million to tempt them. So Chance, do you buy this rumor? And let's say it costs 40 to 45 million for Carlos Soler. Do you buy the player?
I've seen this rumor going around a lot, so I think it does have merit to it. I think this is definitely a player that Arsenal could be interested in, but as for his role, the role that we're looking for is that goal scoring midfielder, I think it's good that he can be deployed on the center and on the right. I think if we were to sign him, I think it could be a more positive outcome to what we should have had with Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain a few years back, to where he was versatile in that way. But I think with Arteta, he would bring that out more. I think the fee of like 40 million, even that, I think for the role that we're looking for, I think that's too much for someone who hasn't scored like maybe around 20 to 30 goals in about 116 appearances. Now I know he is young; he is only 23, and he has a very, very high ceiling. I think that is something that could tempt us to sign him. I think that's something that does kind of sway me towards signing Carlos Soler. I think, I mentioned this on the last episode, how the demand for these kind of midfielders is high, but the supply is small. I think for around, if they need to raise around £40 million, and if they want to slap that price tag on them, I think if Arsenal have the funds, they should definitely go for it, because I think it'd be a good leap to take.
Yeah, so sort of that same logic for paying as much as we did for William Saliba last summer. You know, we parted ways with, I forget how much for the initial down payment, but you know, it was money that we could have used to build the squad this season. But we said, you know what? For the long-term vision of the club, our long-term future, we want to have this guy in, we want to secure him, so let's just pay a little bit over the odds now to get the player. So, Zach, do you think long-term, do you think Carlos Soler would be a welcome addition to the squad? And if so, should we maybe pay a little bit over the odds now to get him? Or are you not terribly convinced that he is, the answer in the middle of the park for us?
I wish I was convinced. I'm not terribly convinced that he's the answer in the middle of the park. I'm just taking a look at his stats from this season, and according to Transfermarkt, it's 3 goals in 27 matches in all competitions with no assists. I think if we're gonna bring in a midfielder, whether he's playing, like I said, centrally, and I think the comparison to Oxlade-Chamberlain is good. A guy who may want to play centrally, but he kind of gets put out wide when it's necessary for the team. I think we would need to see more in his goal contributions to say, yeah, let's splash the cash on him. Just as far as the team necessities go, because we do lack that goal scoring midfielder in our team right now, and I just wouldn't. I'm not saying it couldn't work out. I'm just not entirely convinced on Soler in the Arsenal midfield.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I mean, we keep talking about trying to add goals in midfield to replace Aaron Ramsey somewhat, and as well as we keep mentioning the fact that players sometimes have a difficult time coming from a league like La Liga or Serie A and adjusting to life in England, and we sometimes see those numbers drop. How much lower can you get than 3 goals from 27 appearances? Well, I guess 0 goals. So, yeah. Chance, are you sold on Soler, or do you think maybe, especially considering the fee, is it a sort of similar situation from last week where we talked about Tolisso, where we say, look, I like the player and all, and if we could get him on the cheap, great, but he just costs too much money. Do you think he costs too much?
I don't think he costs too much in this current market, but I think for Arsenal and their financial situation, I think he might cost too much. It's too early to tell.
Gotcha. So it kind of sounds like we're all in agreement. None of us are convinced, but hey, if we can get him for cheap, sounds great. Okay, so we're at about 33 minutes in right now, so that's about as good as a stopping point as any. So listener, thanks so much for sticking around thus far. When we come back for part 2, we were going to get to our Arsenal Transfercast game, where the 2 guests are going to compete for a wonderful prize. So please stick around for that. Okay, hello listener, and welcome back to part 2 of the Arsenal Transfercast from lastwordonfootball.com. Part 2 is where we play a little game where I will act as the host, the moderator of sorts, and I will quiz both Chance and Zach about discussion questions, and I will arbitrarily assign them points on how I feel about their discussion. So, gentlemen, the 2 of you aren't so much going to be debating or arguing, just discussing, but you will be judged. There will be 2 general discussion questions, followed by 1 final question. Now, the discussion questions, obviously, you guys are going to discuss, and the final question, you won't be going so much back and forth. You're just going to give me a direct answer, and I'm going to give you points for all of your answers to all 3 of the questions. And whoever finishes with the most points will win a lovely grand prize. Gentlemen, are we ready?
Yes.
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, so question 1. As per the Daily Star, Dayo Upamecano has informed RB Leipzig, and I hope I said his name right, has informed RB Leipzig of his desire to leave the club. Is a Upamecano-Saliba center-back partnership the answer to all of our prayers? I guess I'll pretend to flip a coin. Ting. All right, Chance, you go first. Is Upamecano-Saliba the best central-back partnership that we could hope for next year as well as for a few years down the line?
I think considering Arsenal has had tons of interest in this kid for at least the past year or two, I think if we were to go for him, I think we would have to deploy him with Saliba, who is basically a new signing again on his own. I think that that new signing would lock up the Premier League, in my opinion. I imagine it in my head, and I just think pure dominant. He's Upamecano and Saliba are both very tough players, both very talented defenders, both very young, and they're amazing for short term and long term, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't really fault you too much for that response. That's, we haven't really seen either one in the Premier League, but they both show all sorts of promise. So, just purely looking at them both, and especially Saliba. When he was training a bit with the club last summer, I just like everyone else, I was glued to my phone looking at him, and he just looks like a beast. So Zach, are Upamecano and Saliba, are they destined if they should both join Arsenal? Well, one of them obviously has already joined, but if Upamecano does join, are they destined to be the next Tony Adams and Steve Bold?
Oh, that would be fantastic if Arsenal could get Upamecano in. I think that he needs to be. I've kind of been torn on whether or not the number one priority in the summer needs to be a midfielder or a central defender. But the more I watch the team play, during this quarantine, I've been going back, watching some highlights, watching extended highlights of some of our performances, and center defense, it's just in shambles. And with the organization under Arteta, the midfield still, I'm not saying don't sign a new midfielder. Midfield still needs work. But the center of defense, if the team can look the way it does under Arteta with a player like Mustafi in defense and David Luiz and Socrates, then with Saliba and Upamecano, they would look a million times better. Two promising French center backs, both very young, that either we can, the hope is that both signings work out great and we have them for years to come. But even if not, we have them for 3-4 years, and then their transfer market, their transfer value skyrockets, and we get a load of money in for them. Either way, that turns out to be a good deal if you get some good use out of them. But I think the Upamecano-Saliba partnership would be perfect.
Yeah, very, very good points there as well. I guess speaking of Mustafi and David Luiz, we talked about this a bit last week, I think, where we sort of counted up, how many center backs we have, and we have a lot of bodies, if nothing else. We've got Mustafi, Luiz, Socrates, we've got even Mavropanos, we've got Callum Chambers, Rob Holding. So, Chance, I'd just like to hear your thoughts on this, since we have so many bodies back there already. Should we make Upamecano a priority, or should we look elsewhere? As we said earlier in the pod, there's all sorts of areas where the squad needs work.
Considering we're going to have Saliba in next season, guaranteed, that's yet another body added to already a good number of center backs. I think Upamecano, of course, Upamecano would be an improvement, a very good improvement in my opinion, but I think we would really want to bring him in if we sold one or two center backs. If we sold, I'd say maybe of our older center backs like Luiz or Socrates. I think we can stick with the likes of Holding, Chambers, and Mustafi. But I think our best bet, and our safest bet, if we want to actually give Upamecano ample playing time and accommodate to our other center backs, we'd have to sell. We would probably have no choice but to sell one or two center backs to free up that space. But I think bringing him in anyway would still be a really good acquisition.
Yeah, I really can't argue with you there. Give you another point for that one. Yeah. If we look at the age profile of most of the defenders, yeah, Luiz, Socrates, they're both in their 30s. I mean, Chambers and Holding, they're still relatively young. You got Mustafi right in the middle. Saliba obviously is very, very young. So I guess number one, how many of these center backs could we get rid of to make room potentially for Upamecano, Zach? Are we going to be able to move? I mean, I think last week we decided, yeah, Luiz is going to be with us next year because we're not going to be able to extract really anything. But then again, Mustafi and Socrates, they're both on expiring contracts, so. I mean, just even if we weren't looking at bringing in another center back, we might be looking at getting rid of them. So, Zach, are we going to see a few of these guys leaving, or would bringing in Upamecano just make an absolute mess of our back line because we've just got too many players?
I think that you have to sell because we have the quantity we have is too much already. But the quality is not nearly what it should be. Thinking about the center backs and also including the thought that Pablo Mari is probably going to be made a permanent deal. So that throws even another body in there. So next season I'm cool if we have Pablo Mari, David Luiz, and maybe Rob Holding to hold on to. You got to get rid of Mustafi. I think you got to get rid of Socrates. Arteta doesn't seem to even want to use him as a center back. He's used him as a right back more so.
For some reason.
Which is mind-blowing. But if next season we went into the season with Marie, Luiz, Saliba, and Upamecano at, 4 center backs, and, Callum Chambers would come back in, slowly because of his injury, I think you have to loan Rob Holding out. Because he's just not been able to get the match fitness in this team. I think that if this unplanned break is good for anything, it's good for Rob Holding to get back to full health. But I do think that he needs a season of playing consistent football and not at the U23 level like he's been playing this year. So you loan out Holding, you sell Socrates, you sell Mustafi, you keep Luiz till next year, but you don't extend the contract. I think that sets up a good look. And then, say Callum Chambers rehabs from his injury, Rob Holding comes back from his loan after the end of next season, and you kind of make a decision on one of those two players, or you keep them all because then Luiz is gone. I think that they could set this up very well. But can we actually find clubs that are willing to take Mustafi and Socrates? Because obviously, we couldn't, this past summer, get Mustafi out. Unai Emery clearly stated, I want him out.
Yeah.
He has no place here. And then Unai Emery gets sacked, and Mustafi starts the first game under Freddie Ljungberg. So there has to be a plan. I hope that they're already in the works of parting ways with those players. But I still think, even with the amount of players we have in, Upamecano, target number 1.
Target number 1. You heard it here first. Or maybe you didn't. I don't really know. But just to sort of wrap up a little bit on this rumor, according to the article from the Daily Star, even though his contract expires in the summer of 2021, the asking price is going to be around £54 million. Now, in part 1, we were discussing a little bit, looks like Milik, Napoli's asking about $50 million for Milik. I mean, Soler's going to cost at least 40 to 45. Now we're talking about Upamecano, 54. Where's all this money coming from? I mean, would we be able to raise £54 million just in the transfer market? Chance, would we be able to raise that kind of money, even if he is, according to Zach, he's our number 1 priority. Who knows who else Anyehi's number 1 priority is? But Chance, can we raise £54 million to pay for this player?
I think raising 54 on its own from nothing is a bit of a stretch, considering the center backs that we'd be selling are either old or not fantastic. I think that if we were to sell the likes of Mustafi, which I think would be a good idea, and Socrates, which I also think would be a good idea, I think it could maybe, if we were to play our cards right, maybe garner us around 25 to 30 million, maybe a bit more if we were to push it a bit farther. If we were to sell them, I think that would definitely be a good push towards gathering the funds for Upamecano. If you were to look at the past rumor, if we were to get rid of Aubameyang and have a bit of cash and Ceballos in, I think that cash from Real Madrid would also be a good push. I think we can definitely raise the 54 million plus the small amount that we'll get from the board. I think we definitely would have enough to get Upamecano. Do I think he's worth it? I think so, considering you have the likes of Harry Maguire going for almost double that. I think Upamecano is definitely worth 54 million based on his current talent and his almost unlimited ceiling. He could definitely turn, due to the constantly rising transfer values of center backs in the last few years. I think if we were to spend this big amount, this 54 million, I think we could definitely make a huge profit on it when he hits maybe his late 20s, his early 30s even. I think he could go. He's one of those players that could definitely go for around 100 million if he were to reach his potential, and even go further than that. That's more money for us. I think this kind of acquisition is one that, like Zach said, it should be our top priority. I think it should definitely be our top priority if we keep Ceballos on a permanent deal and sell our center backs. I think if we were to play those cards, I think our hand would be looking really good for next season and the seasons to come.
Yeah, very good point. I think about considering the potential sell-on value of the player. I mean, we were talking about Pepe just a little bit earlier in the episode, and we paid absolutely through the nose for him. But I remember last summer the talk was, we paid out the nose, but look at how much players like Antoine Griezmann and Kylian Mbappe are going for. We might just make a profit in 2-3 years for Pepe, even if he doesn't deliver us a Europa League title or something, or God forbid, a Premier League. So I guess, Zach, I'll just give you the last word on this topic. £54 million for Upamecano. Is he worth it?
I think so. Look at the money we've spent on some of the players in the squad. When Mesut Ozil signed, he was the record transfer. When Lacazette signed, he was the club record transfer. 6 months later, we broke the club record transfer for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. This past summer, we broke the transfer record at the club for Nicolas Pepe, and we're still not seeing the success that we want to see. Spend the money in defense. Spend the money. They are the backbone of your team. This player is going to help you way more than just one flashy attacking player would. Because when you're solid at the back, you have a better chance going forward. And there's going to be a lot that happens. There's going to be a lot of change within this club this summer, especially with a new manager coming in. Mikel Arteta is going to want to make this his squad, and this would be a great signing to do that.
Yeah, excellent point about, just trying to solidify the back there. If you think about, for example, at Liverpool, anytime that any pundits mention Liverpool this season, whose name has popped up? Well, it hasn't always been Mo Salah. It hasn't always been Sadio Mane. It's been Jordan Henderson. I mean, there's been talk that, if the season does finish up and we do the awards like always, he might just be the Premier League player of the season. He's been so good. And he just does.
And then him and Virgil van Dijk have just been.
There you go.
And when Liverpool signed Van Dijk, it was night and day from the improvement. It was absolutely insane how much they improved under him. Considering they had Joel Matip, Dejan Lovren,
very whelming. They weren't overwhelming. They weren't underwhelming. Just whelming players.
And that's the kind of look that obviously they're different players at Arsenal, but they kind of do the same thing. They're a body. They didn't cost too much, and they can be. These are players that can win trophies if they're the weakest link in the team, but we have too many weakest links playing with each other at the back. And, I think one big signing, and we already got Saliba in. So you add to Saliba, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah. I guess if we want to continue down the Liverpool road, he would be the Joe Gomez to the Virgil van Dijk, if you will.
Exactly.
All right, so let's move on. Chance, I want to give you the first crack at question number 2, and we have mentioned this guy's name a few times already in the discussion from question 1. We're going to talk about Shkodran Mustafi, the probably one of the more controversial players that we've got right now. He has recently, in an interview with Sky Sports, told the publication that his future is, quote, up in the air. And basically, my question for you, Chance, is it really up in the air? I mean, really? We've heard from David Ornstein a few times that after he came into the club, I think maybe the summer of 2017, we didn't try and sell him. But since then, every summer, we have tried to move him. So is his future so much up in the air, or is it just we want to sell him and we're having a tough time selling him?
I think that trend of trying to sell him is going to continue. I think his future is up in the air and will continue to be up in the air until he turns into Van Dijk, which he will not. I think
you heard that here, folks. You heard that here first.
I think that considering his promise when he first signed for Arsenal, I think that at the start of his Arsenal career, he did play well. And then he suffered an injury, and it's just been downhill from there. He hasn't been able to recover. There's been a decent resurgence under Arteta, but I don't think it's enough to keep him considering our bodies. I think that his future is definitely up in the air. Quite elevated.
Yeah. I guess you mean more up in the air, like if we can sell him, we will, but there's no guarantee that we'll be able to sell him.
Yeah, I think that Arsenal are definitely going to look to sell him, basically to fund for a better replacement, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely can't argue with you there. Zach, could you argue with him?
No, I think it is crazy that up in the air is where we've landed with this guy after the turmoil that he's kind of caused at the club, and he's one of those guys that's just like 89 minutes of great football, but somewhere in the middle there's that 1 minute where he is just atrocious. The back pass against Chelsea that got David Luiz sent off at the bridge, and the rest of that game he was solid.
Yeah,
I don't know that there's a player that has the ability to be as solid, but also is guaranteed to make mistakes. It's unbelievable the way this guy plays. Up in the air, I really, it's a damn shame it's up in the air because we spent like $35 million on this guy.
Yep, and that was when 35 on a defender was a lot of money.
Yeah, we're talking a ridiculous transfer fee when you look in hindsight. But I think that Mikel Arteta has been very professional in the media with the way he's handled players. He's even said, Henrik Mkhitaryan, yeah, I like that player. He might have a chance here, which I don't think Arteta believes a word that comes out of his own mouth when he says that. But the way that Unai Emery did it was said, Mustafi, we told him he should leave, he should find a way out. So then clubs don't want to pay really anything for him when they know that he has that the club would part ways with him for like 10 million, even maybe even less. They're gonna lowball you, and that's why Arsenal never accepted an offer for him. But Arteta saying everyone when he came in, everyone's got a clean slate. I'm gonna judge them based on their dedication and training and their play while I'm here, not from what they did in the past. And I think that's a professional way to handle it in the public eye, while behind the scenes, even if he's letting the player know, listen, we're probably going to move on from you. But I think he's just doing flip-flopping on what Emery did and saying, oh yeah, this guy's available for 50 cents. Come take it.
Yeah, bargain bin right here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess there is definitely something to be said about, about how a player is viewed by his own club and how desirable that makes them. I mean, you combine that with the fact that he's on £90,000 per week, which outside of the Premier League, that's a ton of money. I mean, that's about £5 million per season. Most clubs in most countries cannot pay that. So if they're also going to, if they're going to Arsenal and being quoted something like, I have to imagine 20, 25 million for the player, and they also don't want him, and he's on a huge contract, talk about, red flags galore. Mm-hmm. So, Chance, I guess let's come back to you. So Mikel Arteta does seem to like him. And I mean, I guess you can sort of see why Arteta likes to have the ball, and Mustafi can, distribute the ball decently. He's good in the air. When he's not busy fouling people, he is a pretty good tackler. So, does what little he does positively for the club. Has that maybe earned him an extra season or something? Maybe just a bumper contract for an extra season or something?
I think with what he's done under Arteta this season, I think it's maybe earned him an extra 90 minutes if the coronavirus outbreak stops all of a sudden. I think that I have liked what I've seen of Mustafi, but it's the fact that despite how good he could be, he could have, like Zach said, he could have a very solid performance. Heck, even dominating performance. He could be the best player on the field, but take that one attack from the other team, and he could lose us the game. It's that we don't need at this club, and I think it's something that Arteta definitely needs to consider more than what he maybe could have seen in training. Who knows what he sees in training? Maybe Mustafi is perfect in training, and he does deserve to start every week. But then you look at what he does when he starts sometimes, and that merit from Arteta kind of goes away. I think that Arteta, if he wanted to do the smartest thing for the club and for the results that this club needs to start churning out every week in the Premier League, I think Arteta, despite how much he may like him, he may just have to, kind of bite the bullet and sell him.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't quite so much say it's biting the bullet to sell him. I think maybe it's we just need to sell him for whatever we can get for him. Maybe 50 cents isn't too little for him. So
that might even be overshooting it.
Yeah, it might just. I mean, hey, if maybe we can trade him for literally a sack of balls, like you were saying, Zach, that wouldn't be so bad.
Amen.
Yeah, so we are nearing the end of the podcast. So I think do either of you have anything else to add on Mustafi?
Like I said, I just wanted to reiterate, I cannot believe that up in the air is really where we're at. And I hope that behind the scenes it's not, because when I think of this player, I think of there's 3 moments that stand out in his Arsenal career, and none of them are good. That's a spoiler alert. Although I will mention he did score a goal in a North London derby that we ended up winning, so I'll take that.
Which was on my birthday, believe it or not.
There you go. Look at that.
Yeah, buddy.
Winning a North London derby on your birthday, that's not bad. But,
it was the greatest birthday present that he could possibly have given me.
Right?
And then he just ripped my heart out of my chest for the last, 2.5 years since then.
Yeah. But, so the big 3 moments, I already mentioned the back pass at Stamford Bridge that got Luis sent off, which somehow we came back and drew that game, so it didn't end up hurting us as much as it should have. Then you think back to last season against Crystal Palace, where there's a ball over the top to Wilfried Zaha, and he's just inexplicably trying to shield him instead of attacking the ball, and Zaha gets in and scores, and obviously that game plays a role in us not qualifying for the top 4. Mm-hmm. And then a couple seasons back when we were in the League Cup final, there's a ball over the top to Sergio Aguero, and Sergio Aguero steps too close to him, and he falls or acts like he was fouled, and Aguero gets in, scores the opening goal, and we all know how that final went. It's just a player that does that so consistently should have no place in the club, regardless of the positives that he brings. So that's all you need to see, in my opinion, to know that get him out regardless of of the fee that you can get in for him.
Yeah, I think that the key word from the article is that's what Mustafi said. He said that his future is up in the air. This isn't Vinay or Raul saying, we might keep him. So, Chance, I just want to come back to you real quick before we move on to the final question. Zach just gave us his 3 least favorite Mustafi moments, or perhaps his 3 Mustafiest Mustafi moments. So, are there any moments from the past which stand out for you when you think of him?
I think he's hit the nail right on the head for the ones that stand out for me. I mean, apart from the North London Derby goal, I think that there's not much that he's significantly done in certain moments that could stand out to me. I may just be dumb, and maybe someone in the comments could just tell me. But from what I can't even remember, it's just a lot of bad, and I think that bad needs to go away. I think Mustafi saying that his future is up in the air. I actually kind of have a weird feeling that that's just him kind of thinking, oh well, they might actually sell me this time, which I bet he's been saying for the past 3 years. But this time it looks more likely with our bodies and center back. But yeah, I think that when it comes to Mustafi, it's basically been set in stone by all 3 of us at this point.
Yeah, I'd just like to add probably the one Mustafi moment which always sticks with me, which has stuck with me the longest. That was the Europa League semifinal, first leg at home against Atleti. And I forget exactly what happened, but there was a ball over the top, and we were dominating. We were all over Atleti. I think we were up by 1. Yeah, we were up by 1 goal. A ball comes in over the top. Griezmann gets on the end of it. Mustafi's racing back. And then he just kind of trips and falls forward and leaves Ospina completely on his own. Griezmann puts the ball in the back of the net, and then you can see from the camera angle as Griezmann's going off to celebrate, you see Mustafi in the background raising his arms, looking at everyone else, going, "What happened, guys?"
He does it every single time. He has never taken the blame for his mistakes.
Yeah, when he clearly tripped and fell, and he's looking at Ospina. What did you do? What? All right, so I think that's enough Mustafi for one podcast. So moving into our final question, fellas, it's a very exciting game. We are tied at 10. You both have 10 points, so that means that the grand prize will go to the winner of the final question. I'm just gonna flip another coin here, see who goes first. All right, Zach, you are going to go first for the final question. The question is, well, it's more of a statement. Sum up your feelings towards Jose Mourinho in 5 words. Whenever you're ready, sir.
So last week I gave 3 adjectives when we were doing Mikel Arteta's hair. This I'm going with a short sentence now that I've been given the grace of 5 words. And those 5 words, I would describe him as an utter disgrace to football.
Wow. Oof, scathing. Absolutely scathing, and I absolutely love it, Zach. I'm going to give you 10 whole points for that response, because he really is. All right, Chance, you need 11 points to win. No pressure, Chance. Sum up your feelings towards Jose Mourinho in 5 words.
I think it's quite simple. He's kind of Spurs at this point. And look what he's doing. I think there are only I'll do another sentence as well. 5 words to describe him. The special one is dead.
Ooh, he is special no longer. I always hated that nickname of his. Saying that, I am the special one, or whatever he actually said. And because he wasn't. He never really was. He was just really good at organizing a defense. And then, for example...
Park the bus.
Yeah, park the bus. And then, while he was at Chelsea, he had, for example, Drogba, who would just pop up with a clutch goal because he was just, the most clutch striker of his generation, basically. At Real Madrid, he just organized the defense and said, when we have the ball, give it to Ronaldo, because he's freaking Ronaldo. So he just... Tactics. Yeah, he's just never been a special one. So, Chance, I think I'm going to give you 11 points. You're our big winner for this week. Congratulations, buddy.
Oh, why, thank you.
Would you like to hear what you've won?
Yes.
You have won our grand prize for this week, which is a toilet-sized replica of the new White Hart Lane. Although Chance, would you please tell the audience your nickname for the new White Hart Lane?
Shite Hart Lane, everybody.
And now you can take a shite on the new Shite Heart Lane, Chance. Congratulations. We will get that shipped out to you as soon as we can.
Thank you so much. I cannot believe it.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the pod, listener. Thank you so much for tuning in. We had a really great time recording today. Just as always, we sure hope you had a good time listening. If you do have the time, please go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know what you think, what we did right, what we did wrong. Would you like to hear more of next week on the pod? Once again, I am Martin Hawkins. You can find me on Twitter at LWOSMartin. My two guests are Zach Rayment and Chance Haire. You can find Zach on Twitter at ZankRayment. Thanks so much, Zach.
Thank you for having me.
And you can find Chance Haire with an E on Twitter at Chance Haire, LWOS. Thank you, Chance.
Thanks for having me as well.